I am so excited to be making today's video. I have made several videos on how to track your cycle, things around how to avoid pregnancy through tracking your cycle, things around trying to conceive when tracking your cycle, and I'm going to keep making those information videos. But today I'm excited because this is the first video around living in sync with my cycle. A quick introduction, I'm Common Free. I'm an employment relations practitioner and I'm also a small business owner. I'm self-employed. On top of that, I am all about conscious and intentional living, a lot of things around sustainability, eco-friendly, natural living, and of course, tracking my cycle, living in sync with my cycle, fertility, well-being, the health of women, the health of anybody really, but obviously I'm a woman, so I focus on women's health, and I think that's the only relevant information for this video. My disclaimer for today's video, I share my experience, I share some things that I've read, I share some information that I've picked up along the way. I also share my opinion, but I do not share medical advice. I am not interested in telling other people what they should or shouldn't be doing, and I don't presume to know what is best for you. In this video, as with all of my videos, please just take what serves you and leave what doesn't serve you. And then I also want to say for this video, I used to fall into the camp of believing that hormonal contraceptives or contraceptives in general liberated women. I used to believe that feminism or being a strong woman meant that I acted very much similar to a man and I just pretended like I didn't have a uterus or a period. And I don't believe those things anymore. I have major concerns about the pill. I have made a video about my experience coming off of the pill. Maybe I will make some more videos around my concerns of the pill in general, but I no longer believe that it liberated me as a woman. So I do have my regrets for being on the pill. Specifically, I was on Yaz, but I'm not advocating for women to opt for my preferred method of avoiding pregnancy or my preferred method of approaching the discomfort that I experienced from having a cycle and from my period. What I will say is if I had known exactly how the pill really worked and what it was doing to my body and what the longer term effects were of it, I don't think I would have taken it. So I share information so that others can potentially look into it more if they want to, or make a more informed decision if they didn't already have that information. I'm big on everybody must do what is best for them, and there are no exceptions to that. That all being said, you cannot live in sync with your cycle if you don't have a cycle. Women taking hormonal birth control that suppresses ovulation do not have a cycle. The pill is one example of hormonal birth control that suppresses ovulation. It doesn't balance out our hormones. It adds some new synthetic ones that prevent ovulation from taking place, thus preventing pregnancy. It also doesn't regulate our periods. The bleed that happens when you are on the pill is a withdrawal bleed from the hormones because the time when you bleed is either at the time when you take those placebo pills, or commonly referred to as the sugar pills, or the bleed will happen right thereafter as a result of the withdrawal of not taking the hormones in that time. That function of the pill is often explained as a marketing tool because apparently women used to feel very uncomfortable about taking something that completely made their bleed disappear. So they reworked the pill so that it would mimic your real cycle and cause there to be a bleed because women felt uncomfortable by not bleeding. But that bleed does not actually have a function when you're taking the pill. Other than, like I just said, it was a marketing tool to get women to feel less uncomfortable about taking the pill. I've read that in a few sources, but if you think that that is incorrect or you have information contrary to that, let me know in the comments below. Someone who has an IUD that does not secrete hormones is able to live in sync with their cycle so long as you can confirm that your IUD is not suppressing your ovulation. So my recommendation is track your cycle to see if you are ovulating, to see if you do have a cycle, if you have an IUD in. There are some IUDs that secrete synthetic hormones and oftentimes those ones will suppress your ovulation. However, the best way to know if you are or aren't ovulating is to track your cycle to check if you are ovulating and if you have a cycle, given that you have an IUD, whether it is or isn't secreting hormones. But the ones that are secreting hormones are likely to alter your natural cycle, making it quite difficult to live in sync with it. So basically, a requirement for living in sync with your cycle is to have a menstrual cycle, having natural fluctuations that bring about changes across the various phases of your menstrual cycle. Living in sync with my cycle now, I realized that the time when I was suppressing my cycle, when I was in the pill, I really didn't feel much like myself. Taking away my cycle, as well as the side effects of Yaz, had an impact on my well-being, my libido, my creativity, my productivity, and my general excitement for life. And here I just want to add that yes, there were times when I felt like having a cycle and having a period is a curse. And I was very tempted to medicate away my cycle with hormonal birth control. But I only ever felt like it was a curse when I wasn't honoring my body and when I wasn't living in sync with my cycle. Living in sync with my cycle and understanding my cycle and my body, having that awareness and the gifts that it brings me has literally been life enriching. Because of the profound impact it's had on my life, I talk about it all the time. But because I speak about it so often, there is a comment that I very frequently get that I want to address in this video. And that is the comment of, I don't want my whole life to revolve around my period. And living in sync with my cycle is not that. But let's dive into that a little bit more. Let's unpack that. I have a cycle. I have had a cycle since I was 13 years old. The only time I didn't have a cycle was the 6 years that I took Yaz, the hormonal contraceptive, and I've had a cycle again for the last 4 years. My cycle brings about changes because my hormone levels are changing. It impacts me. It impacts my enthusiasm, my pessimism, my metabolism, my energy levels, my libido, my social orientation, my creativity, and so much more. It impacts these things whether I choose to acknowledge it or not. And I used to not acknowledge it. I used to exert energy expecting my mind and my body to act exactly the same every single day, like a man's 24-hour hormonal fluctuations. And that was pretty exhausting. I became incredibly despondent with the difficulties that I experienced with my PMS for the 2 weeks leading up to my period. But fortunately for me, two things happened. One, I will not go back on hormonal birth control under any circumstances in the face of a gynecologist telling me that that was my only option was very strong. And two, I have a very wise cousin. She recommended a resource to me. I ended up reading the book, and it's a good one. It is called In the Flow. Please note, I do not take any dietary advice from that book, but that book was the start of me living in sync with my cycle. I used to, without really even noticing it, spend so much energy and time working against my body and against my mind. I was expecting them to operate the same every single day. I would go to gym and my body is telling me that it needs to rest, and I would just ignore that because, you know, no pain, no gain, or push through it, it will be worth it, or whatever other slogans come out of the fitness and diet industry that caused me to not listen to what my body was telling me. My body was telling me this is the time for rest, or this is the time not to push extra hard in the gym. Pain is the body speaking. Energy levels is the body speaking to us. Our bodies are constantly speaking to us. We can choose to listen and honor what the body is saying, or we can choose to, like I did for very long, just ignore what my body was telling me. At times I would medicate my body to do what I wanted it to do when I wanted it to do it. I medicated my concentration levels. I medicated any kind of pain or discomfort that I was experiencing. I took away any kind of symptoms that the body was telling me with various medications. I used a whole host of supplements to force my body to have the same level of energy every single day. But eventually, if we carry on ignoring our bodies when it is speaking to us, it might start screaming at us. And mine did. My PMS was really unbearable. My mood swings were incredibly intense. And honestly, at the time, I didn't even realize it was that bad until I felt better. And then I realized how bad it had actually gotten. I didn't realize to what degree my life was being impacted either by my decision to have taken Yaz for the 6 years that I did take Yaz, or for all of the times that I didn't live in sync with my body. I didn't listen to my body giving me signs and trying to tell me what it was needing, until I really started living with my body like we are a team, because we are a team. I cannot function without my body. I've been off the pill again for over 4 years now, and I've been living in sync with my cycle for over 2.5 years. Before I was made aware of the connection to my cycle, I wasn't aware that the changes were as a result of my cycle. But when I listened to In the Flow and it spoke of how our hormones impact so much of our life, which is why they will change across our cycle, I just kept finding myself being like, yes, I do notice that the 1 week I'm very social, I'm very loving, I want to be around people. And then 2 weeks later, I'm much more internal. I want to focus on more isolated tasks, and social events just aren't as enjoyable for me in that phase. And yes, I do notice that my concentration changes across my cycle. There will be days where I'm incredibly detail orientated, and then there will be other days where I want to be more creative. I want to be more strategic in my approach to things. And yes, I notice that my cravings change. The things that my body tells me it wants to eat changes across my cycle. I notice how much I want to eat because my metabolism is changing across my cycle. I notice my changes to my energy levels when my body is telling me it needs to rest, changes to my strength, changes to my libido. And yes, I was noticing that I was incredibly frustrated, more or less close to my period. Our hormones as human beings, male or female, impact every single aspect of our functioning. So it only makes sense to me to live in sync with the hormonal fluctuations that I physically experience as a woman. Men also have hormonal fluctuations, except theirs are on a 24-hour cycle, and the female fluctuations are across a more or less 28-day period, depending obviously on how long or short your menstrual cycle is. So to answer the comment of, does my life revolve around my period? It does not, but all of our lives revolve around our hormones. And my period is one phase that comes about as a result of the hormonal changes. So whether we choose to acknowledge it or not, all of our lives revolve around our hormonal fluctuations. They're going to impact you. They're going to impact every single aspect of your life. So what I'm saying is, given that it is happening, instead of fighting against it, why not ride the wave to create greater cohesion and ease in your life? Actually, it's not just creating cohesion and ease, but it is the gifts that come with being in tune to what is the best time to do certain things. When will your creative juices be flowing more abundantly? When are you going to be better at more attention to detail, admin-orientated tasks? When are you going to feel more social and outgoing? When are you going to feel at your strongest and your most energetic? And don't misunderstand me. I am not saying that I'm not able to do my financial statements and my invoices at every single phase of my cycle. I most definitely am able to do those things at any given day of my cycle. It's just I'm so much better at doing them when I do them in my luteal phase, when I am more admin orientated, when my attention to detail is much higher than it is in any other phase. I can most definitely do public speaking in any phase of my cycle. Public speaking is something that I love to do on any given day, but I notice that the way that I do it is much richer if it falls around ovulation. I can also create social media posts any day of the week or any day of the month. However, if I do them in my follicular phase, my more creative phase, I just find that they come with so much more ease than when I'm doing them on any other day. So I'm not saying women can't do things in the different phases of their cycle. Of course they can. I'm saying when you do it in sync with your cycle, you do it with less energy and you achieve much more. It flows with ease. I keep saying with ease, but I don't know how else to explain it. And if you've experienced it, I think you'll know what I mean. Things just come easier when you're doing them in sync sync with the natural flows of your hormones. It just also flows when you're not trying to force your body to do things at a phase when it's not best suited to be doing that activity. And I have been a woman in the workplace. I'm self-employed now, but I wasn't always self-employed. I know the pressures on women to perform. I know the stigmas and the comments and all of the things around women and women's periods and how women are in their periods and hormones and all of those comments. So I know the pressures that women feel to either pretend they don't have a period or medicate their period to the extent that it doesn't impact their functioning at all, or nobody will know that they have their period on that particular day. The pressures that there are on women to perform in the workplace, given some of the old stigmas that are still there in the workplaces. And because I know those things, I know that that is a major point of resistance why a lot of women don't want to live in sync with their cycle. And I know that there is a resistance to acknowledging that your hormones impact every facet of your being, given how many times women have heard the comments of women being hormonal. I understand, but we are all hormonal. We are hormonal beings, and our hormones impact us, masculine or feminine. And I do understand, and I shared this fear that if I live in sync with my cycle, if I honor my body's call for rest when it's telling me to rest, or when I honor that now is not the best time for me to be doing my financial statements or my invoices, or now is not the best time for me to be creating a new workshop or a new training or launching a new product, the fear is that will I be able to perform? Will I be able to make money? Will my business be successful if I honor the various fluctuations that I experience as having a female cycle? And what I want to comment here is when you do live in sync with your cycle, when you do go with the natural flow of things, you let go of the urgency to perform on a 24-hour cycle. You let go of the urgency that everything must happen today, or you need to be able to be the same level of productive today, or you need to be able to do the same strength exercises you did yesterday in the gym again today. And what you're likely to notice when you live in sync with your cycle and you let go of the urgency to be the same in every 24-hour period, where you start to look at what did you accomplish in a 28-day period, or however long your cycle is. What did you accomplish across the 4 phases of your menstrual cycle when you did the tasks, not based on the criteria or measuring yourself on what did I accomplish in the day. You're asking yourself, what did I accomplish in this cycle? So you're shifting the focus of the masculine. They have a 24-hour cycle. What they achieve on an everyday basis, they can just wake up the next day and kind of measure what do you achieve on that day and run it that way. Women don't have a 24-hour cycle. We have a 28-day cycle. And in my experience, if I look across my cycle, the current me, the me that lives in sync with my cycle, runs my business in sync with my cycle, does literally my whole life in sync with my cycle, I am able to outperform by a lot the on the pill me who operated on a 24-hour cycle and was a workaholic. Sorry about the repetition. Just saying to stop taking away the urgency of what am I achieving every single day and start focusing on what am I achieving across my cycle. To be able to honor that maybe next week is the best time for you to be doing the task that is causing you so much frustration today. To let go of the sense of urgency of needing to feel like you have to get everything done today, or today needs to be perfect, or you have to have the same level of energy every single day. Letting go of that urgency and just leaning in to when the best times are for you to do something results on average, in my experience, to an outcome of a higher performance. Okay, I spoke a lot now about performance as if it is like the main priority of my life, to perform and to somehow succeed at doing all of those things. That isn't necessarily the case. The reason I put the emphasis there is just because those are the fears that I had when I first started living in sync with my cycle. I genuinely had fears that my business was going to fail because there's nobody else I knew that was running their self-employed professional service business in sync with their cycle. It felt really scary to do that and to wonder, will I be able to, I don't want to say compete because I'm also not a competitive person, but will I be able to have a business that succeeds in a society that isn't necessarily inclined to care that much about female health or female hormones? So that's just why I spoke about performance a lot. But actually in my life, I prioritize well-being, and from that flows performance. And even though performing was one of the greatest concerns I had before I started living in sync with my cycle, it was the greatest unintentional gift I got from living in sync with my cycle and honoring the changes that I experience across the various phases. I was able, and I am able to perform. I am able to make money, and I have been self-employed, and my business, in my opinion and my metric of success, does well. So clearly I have been able to do those things while riding the natural waves that come with my female body. And it has been incredibly life enriching. So that for me is the why. Why should we live in sync with our cycles? Coming up next is the how. How does this practically play out? I'm not going to address the how in this video. If you would like to see the how, please remember to subscribe to my channel and I'll keep making these videos around that. But what I will say, just a quick word on the how. I do have other videos that go into a lot more detail about the cycles. So if you are familiar with the female cycle, you could just click out of this video now. Thank you for watching. If you're not that familiar, just stick around for like another minute or two. What you're going to be looking at across your female cycle, there are 4 phases. The starting part of your phase is when your bleed starts to happen. The first day of red bleeding, that is your period. That is your menstrual phase. That is, if you like to refer to them by their seasons, your winter phase. Once your bleed has ended, your follicles are growing, and that is your follicular phase. Your follicular phase runs between your period, your bleed, and when you ovulate. Then technically ovulation is just a short event. It's about 24 hours. However, I take my entire fertile window as my ovulation phase. Once you have ovulated, you will start what is called your luteal phase because you develop a cyst. Oftentimes we've been told that the word cyst is like an ugly word. The body creates a natural cyst that is a wonderful cyst that produces a lot of hormones that are great for you. It is called the corpus luteum, which is why this phase is called the luteal phase. It is typically the longest phase of your cycle because it runs from ovulation to your period, and it is probably the only one that has a more or less a fixed period of time. So it runs for about 12 to 14 days. And then as soon as you bleed red again, that is when you start a new cycle. Across these 4 phases, you'll go from your bleed, your winter, into your follicular phase, your spring, into your ovulation, your summer, into your luteal phase, your autumn. Across these 4 phases, your hormones fluctuate and they bring about changes to every aspect of your life. Your libido, your energy, your metabolism, what your body is going to be craving in terms of food, your strength, your creativity, your task orientation, your social orientation, how you're feeling about certain relationships. Literally, all of those things are going to be impacted by the hormonal changes that you experience across your cycle. The how of living in sync with your cycle is becoming aware of what you experience in those various phases of your cycle. And that was a very quick how, so that you can so long while I work on making the next video start to implement this in your life if you want to. If you have been living in sync with your cycle and you watched this video, please comment down below and share your experience for other women watching this video who have not yet lived in sync with their cycle, who might want some inspiration or some information from your experience of doing it. If you had a different experience to me, please share that as well so that women can get a very balanced view on what it is like to live in sync with their cycle and not just take my word for it. And women who have not yet lived in sync with their cycle, if you do have fears, you do have concerns, you do have anything that you are maybe skeptical about, wondering, doubtful about, comment that down below. Let me know what it is that is causing a resistance in you to not want to do this. If you're thinking this is not for me, I'd love to know why that is. And then of course, if you found any value in this video or you just find it mildly interesting, please give it a like. That is helpful for me to continue to make these videos. Remember to subscribe to my channel, and thanks for being here with me today.